It is the show of record here on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel. It is the Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate. Each and every week we sit here on Sundays and we recap the Saturday that was. My bullet points I want to get to today. Part one, Alabama, down, out, and over before we hit November. Bullet point number one. Bullet point number two, Georgia, back and better than ever. Kirby Smart blaming the network and the refs for a big win. Bullet point number three, who's going to come out of the SEC? It is completely wide open. Bullet point number four, Lincoln Riley's 3-4 in their first season in the Big Ten. And bullet point number five, don't look now. Coach Prime, Colorado, 5-2, best start since 2017, primed for a bowl game. As we now check in with Paul Finebaum, presented by Allstate. Paul, good morning. Happy Sunday. How's it going?
Yeah, Matt, every week we wonder, can it be more bewildering? But let's start with Alabama.
Okay,
Alabama.
okay.
I mean, I,
This,
I
this
mean,
show might be an hour today based
I mean,
on what you.
Alabama. I mean, where can you go? I mean, Alabama is an absolute train wreck. There's no sugarcoating it, and I'm sure Kalen DeBoer and his cast of minions can try to act like they control. I actually heard somebody say Alabama controls its own destiny. For what? The end of the world? I mean, why would you now believe Alabama, after what we've seen the last 3 weeks, is now going to get off the canvas, beat Missouri, which is not great, but still formidable, because anybody is formidable for Alabama right now, and then go down to Baton Rouge and beat LSU after what we saw from LSU last night. And that's really the number one bullet point, I think, Matt. Uh, yeah, we may wake up here in a couple of months and look back and go, "Wow, maybe we were wrong." But that's part of the conversation that exists here. But it's not even it's not the play on the field. It's a lack of discipline. I mean, every time they had a chance to put that game a little bit further away from Tennessee or to come back in the game, they made a stupid penalty. They made a stupid decision. And ultimately, who does that rest with? Is that the players or is that the coaching? To me, this does not look like a well-coached team.
So I brought this up on Sunday Bloody Sunday that there are things about Alabama that are starting to rear their head now, and it's unfortunate in that for 17 years, and I hate, look, what do we always say? You don't want to be the guy that replaces the legend. We're seeing it, Paul, right in front of our eyes. Because what happens every time Alabama has a misstep like that personal foul late in the game? Was he taunted by the Tennessee player? Yes. Should the Tennessee player have been flagged? Yes, but he didn't. Now you're 4th and 22. What we're seeing, Paul, is we're seeing an Alabama program who is so locked up for 17 years under Nick Saban. It's almost as if now that Saban's gone, everyone in the building relaxed. And we're seeing it on Saturdays with stuff we haven't seen in a decade plus. And if you hit on it, think about where we were, was it 4 Sundays ago
Yeah.
today after Georgia? And we're talking about closure in the Nick Saban era. They got it right. Alabama could be better. They've gone Vanderbilt loss, South Carolina near miss, and Tennessee loss. They're this season, SEC playoff, they're out. They're done.
They're over the state of Tennessee, in case anybody in the volunteer state was keeping track. Matt, listen, yeah, it was 3 weeks ago today. I sat here and talked about how Alabama looked better coached last night, meaning the Georgia game, than the last couple of years of Nick Saban. I meant by that, it looked like they were together across the board. Saban did not have a great staff his last year. Um, it was a mirage. And we certainly you can I don't even care about the Georgia game anymore because they threw it away. Whatever they did in that first half, they let it go in the second half, and they haven't gotten it back. And there's no reason to believe they're going to get it back, because I think the real issue now is Kalen DeBoer is going to experience things that no coach at Alabama has experienced in 2 decades, and that's all the noise. And the noise in Alabama is loud. I was in Alabama last week, Matt, for 2 days. And I mean, I was going through TSA at the airport, and somebody working at the airport grabbed me and said, "Hey, what's with this guy?" And I was like, "What guy?" He said, the guy coaching at Alabama. I mean, they were that was before the Tennessee game. They didn't even want to mention his name. I mean, there was a bailout of DeBoer, and I'm not trying to say because I ran into a guy at a coffee shop or a guy at the airport that's the newest CNN, Fox, MSNBC tracking poll. But
Sure.
I talk to enough people, and I hear from enough people from that fan base, and they are besides themselves. And I mean, is it going to get better for Kalen DeBoer? I mean, he inherited a pretty good team. And has made a mess out of it. So why are we now going to believe that this guy who's never been in anything like this before is suddenly going to figure it out?
The thing that stuns me, and it stunned Galloway when we were watching yesterday, is Jalen Milroe couldn't have looked any better in the first half against Georgia. Paul, and I hate going right at players. They're college students, but they're getting paid like pros. So at this point, you have to start evaluating them as such. Jalen Milroe has fallen to a point of it's just not. I mean, Paul, there was zero confidence that offense was going to get going last night. I wouldn't have said that a month ago.
No, and that listen, when your games have two halves, we see that every week, but that's what the coaching staff is supposed to do. And Kalen DeBoer is an offensive coach, so you have to prepare these guys and in the middle of a crisis, figure it out. And I had somebody from the West Coast remind me that a lot of Washington's games were like this, but that's the Pac-12. You accept that. But this is the SEC, and you can't get away with it, and you certainly can't get away with it in a cauldron of intensity like Neyland Stadium.
Yeah, and so let's go. I want to advance the Alabama story because again, we're kind of I'm puzzled by it. I like again after Georgia, I didn't think we'd be here. Where does Alabama go now? Because inside, the thing that I just can't get over, like you said, they've got Missouri, LSU, Mercer, Oklahoma, Auburn, and the Iron Bowl. The thing that I can't get over, 4 weeks in a row, they've had penalties that have been absolutely debilitating. Not procedure, not holding, just boneheaded lack of discipline penalties. To me, that's the sign of a program that's not healthy.
Yeah, listen, I don't want to chisel this down and sound like every high school coach in America, but they really it's now week to week. Missouri, it's hard to believe Missouri is capable of beating Alabama after what we saw against Auburn yesterday. Yeah, it was one for the ages, but it was against Auburn,
Right.
which is program spinning out of control. It's really going to come down to the LSU game, and that's an equally intense atmosphere, maybe more intense, depending on what time that game starts. But I can't imagine that not being a night game.
Sure.
But who knows? I don't do the schedule for ABC. But it's still going to be an incredibly difficult game that I don't think Alabama can win right now. So, they go 9-3 and miss the playoffs. Kalen DeBoer can rub his hands together and go, man, we were this close, and fans are going to yawn and go, that's not enough.
Right.
It's always been playoff or bust for me with this first season with Kalen DeBoer, considering he started the season with a Heisman Trophy finalist quarterback.
Yeah. Well, and take that one step further. We also invited 8 more teams into the college football playoffs. The fact that there's 12 teams and Alabama likely won't be one of them, I think is unheard of based on where we've been in college football. So do you think the bigger storyline from Saturday was Tennessee having that growth point in their program or Alabama in a bad way?
Yeah, I think it was Alabama because, listen, Alabama trumps Tennessee in a game of meaningful poker. Tennessee did not start the season inside the playoff bubble. Alabama did. Tennessee has looked good and bad and everything else. And for Tennessee, the game was absolutely critical. I mean, that goes without saying. I'll leave it to the playoff uh, gurus, but Alabama's a better chance to get back with a loss than Tennessee. Tennessee has Georgia left, and really that's about it.
Yeah, and the SEC for the first time in a while, you're almost looking at a dog eat dog scenario with where it is up top, because right now the only unbeaten teams in conference are A&M and LSU. They meet each other this week, so one of those teams is going to have a loss, and so now a bunch of one-loss teams, even Vanderbilt sitting there at 2-1 in the league, and so we haven't seen the 12-team format. Paul, I would imagine just based on what's going on around the country, there's going to be someone in the SEC with 2 losses that gets in. But who is that now? I mean, Ole Miss loses to Kentucky, who got pummeled by Florida. I mean, there's just, I haven't seen it, and I know you haven't. You've covered the league much longer than I've been around.
Longer than
The,
anyone.
the parity. I mean, I think Georgia is still the class based on what we saw against Texas, but like, who are you laying your chips on to make the playoff in the SEC based on what we've seen through 8 weeks?
Well, you move Georgia and Texas off the board, and then you start to figure it out. I think LSU's in really good shape. I mean, even if they lost to Texas A&M, they still have a path, probably just beating Alabama. But I say that because everybody has Alabama and LSU both have games against Oklahoma, but those are no longer games that we talk about. Those are automatic after what we saw yesterday. So it's really a matter of the path, and that's why Georgia so desperately needed to win in
Yeah.
Austin, because they have a game at Ole Miss, and that's a mystery to me. Ole Miss is probably the most intriguing team. They have 2 losses, but could they beat Georgia? Yeah, it's possible. Tennessee now looks like a playoff team. You have to say LSU. I mean, I know I'm putting too many in,
Right.
because we're not sitting here looking at the 16 schools and the schedule. But I mean, I think the SEC is back to 4. The other day, I was wondering, outside shot at a 5th, depending.
What did you make of Kirby's post-game comments to Katie George?
It reminded me of stuff I've heard from Nick Saban. These guys now, Matt, always want to blame someone. It's easier that way. It's how they get their players fired up. I mean, remember Georgia, was it 2 years ago when they won the title? Uh, they one of the players on Georgia said, I can't believe you guys disrespected us and said we were going 7-5. I'm like going, they were the preseason #1 team in the country. But that's how. I remember Alabama last year, the whole
Yeah.
length thing. That's the new thing that players and coaches work on. And I mean, Kirby was just simply channeling his inner Nick Saban there. It was pretty funny. I thought Katie George just, instead of doing what some would have done and push back and ended up with a pie in her face, she just kind of laughed like, I don't make predictions.
So yeah, I didn't watch SEC Nation, but who picked? Did everyone pick Texas on your show?
I think so. There may have been one who didn't, but I pointed that out because I'm sure you did too all day. I mean, you kind of have to say like, are we going to wake up Sunday going, why did we have so little faith in Kirby Smart? Because it's just the way we work now. Matt, I think predictions sometimes are based less on what people really believe, but as opposed
Right.
to which way the wind is blowing. It just seems like with all the FPIs and all, there's just we all do it. I mean, I was sitting there in Knoxville yesterday going, I really feel good about Tennessee, but there's Alabama can't lose this game. I mean, you start thinking about things that have nothing to do with it.
But see, that's exactly why I picked Georgia. Galloway picked Georgia. A number of people picked Georgia because I was sitting there going, there's no way that Georgia, who's still loaded, is going to
Yeah,
have 2 losses before November. There's just no way.
yeah.
And so I'm trying to figure out, maybe game day did. I don't know,
Well,
but
I'm pretty sure it was game day. And by the way, it's not like Kirby Smart is flipping the dial. Somebody told him everybody on game day probably picked uh, Texas because they were outside his hotel room, I'm sure, and so that's what he would. I am pretty sure that's what he's referring to. I sincerely doubt Kirby was channel surfing at the same time he was having team meetings.
yeah, I saw it. And I'm like Kirby, come on, you're a hell of a football coach. You reached 100 wins in 117 games quicker than Nick Saban and Steve Spurrier. Like, it's just those shots after the game that you just get done winning. you really for maybe aside from a third quarter, you just beat the hell out of Texas, the number
Yeah.
one team in the country.
I think it had more to do with just the narrative all week long. And by the way, I was guilty of that narrative, like going, it feels like, I mean, but everything I do, because you've interviewed me enough times on Sports Center, I say, if this happens, you don't say this
Yeah.
is going, and I made it clear, if this happens, we're going to see a paradigm shift here. But and it felt like we were about to see it, but leave it to Texas.
Yeah, in Texas, look, they've got the one loss. There's a chance there could be a rematch between Georgia and Texas in the SEC, which I think we'd all sign up for. I think maybe
Sure.
Texas would be a little bit better prepared this time. Not that they weren't prepared, but I think they'll know now what's coming because you're in a completely different weight class.
Yeah.
I mean, that was really their first true SEC game. When you think about the Oklahoma game, they're used to that. That's comfort food for them out of the Big 12, 120 times they've played them. They went to Michigan. Michigan's got 3 losses. They lost to Illinois yesterday. They're out of the picture. So how this shapes up down the stretch, as I said earlier on the other show, is going to be what we watch because there's so much football and so many games left to be played, which leads me to a guy named Mike Elko, who's the first A&M coach to win 6 of his first 7 games since 1918. All right. By all accounts, maybe he was their second choice because of the Mark Stoops backlash. Whatever the case might be, A&M's got 1 loss, Paul. Opener to Notre Dame, haven't lost since.
No, by the way, he was the second choice to Mark Stoops. I can now confirm that here on the Matt Barrie podcast. Um, but it doesn't matter because he's done such a great job. And that game yesterday, nobody was really paying attention to Mississippi State, but they're just kind of an annoying team that gets in your way, and nobody has had an easy time with them. They still lose every game, but nobody. But that's something you have to overcome, and I really was impressed. But this game now suddenly, I didn't anticipate LSU Texas A&M being possibly the defining game of next Saturday. But the slate is not exactly overwhelming. So yeah, it's a moment in time for A&M, and having been out there about a month ago, Matt, they're pretty well situated. It's really amazing to be out there recently versus a year ago with the Jimbo Fisher clown show going on.
Where are you with Brian Kelly and LSU now?
I'm pretty high on them. I deal with Brian Kelly every week on our
Yeah.
show. He's a regular guest, which I do right after I talk to you. And he has had to navigate a lot, and I like that about this program. I mean, I'll state the obvious, but they should have about 3 losses right now. And they dropped the USC game, which they probably should have won. They won the South Carolina game, which they probably should have lost. And I still haven't figured out how they won the Ole Miss game.
Right.
But the fact that they did, I think they're getting confidence. And last night, I thought was a incredible trap game. I was with a couple of folks on our show Saturday that thought Arkansas would win. So that was this stretch here has always been dicey, but I like the momentum. Nussmeier is playing really well. They've lost a couple of key players, but what's interesting is when they lost Harold Perkins, the All-American linebacker, a lot of people said, "Oh my goodness!" But in some ways, that defense has played freer without him being there.
Right. And look, I said this about Miami earlier this morning that sometimes all a team needs is to learn how to win. And it could be as simple as that. And you just brought up 2 examples that one went against them, one went for them. South Carolina at South Carolina, you're right. There was a couple of pick sixes called back and some turns that went their way, but they won. And then the Ole Miss game, it seemed like it was Ole Miss for pretty much 3.5, three-quarter quarters. And Garrett Nussmeier comes up big 4th and 5. They find a way to win that game. And so sometimes if you're in a season where you don't look dominant and you find a way to win, that's all you need. And LSU's doing that, Paul.
Yeah, and I think some of it comes under the fact that I still believe Brian Kelly is one of the elite coaches in the country. A lot of
Yep.
people push back on that. That's fine. I was, thinking that Kalen DeBoer was one of the elite coaches in the country 3 weeks ago. So I mean, these things are cyclical, but I like what I see there. I haven't really thought about this game very much yet, but if LSU does win the game, though. they're within striking distance of the playoffs, and really the winner of this game is incredible shape. And I can't give you the FBI tracker. I'm sure somebody could.
Yeah, look, and there's now you're going to start. We're at that point of the schedules. We go to week 9. You can now point, okay, that game is huge. That game's going to decide stuff. That game's going to decide stuff. All right, 2 more. We'll wrap up here. Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate. Number 1, I present you a team that beat LSU in week 1, has gone into the Big Ten. USC lost a game against Maryland yesterday.
Oh.
We were sitting there watching it. I got it when they were lining up to kick the field goal. I just thought it was over. Went up to go refill my water thing, and I come back and I'm like, why is Maryland have the ball? Lincoln Riley and USC are 3-4 this season.
Yeah, this is a bad marriage, and I've been all over the map because I really felt in the offseason, Matt, that this thing was not going to work out. And then they win a game or two, and you have to give them some credit. But the Big Ten's too big for SC. This is why Lincoln Riley bailed out on Oklahoma to go to the Pac-12. He just this is not this is not what he's built for, and I really don't know how he's going to survive. I mean, I know that yeah, he's still got that incredible reputation, although he's done a good job of blowing it. But 4 losses. I mean, this is at least going to be a 5-loss team. Now, when you look at what they have ahead, it could be worse because did you know anybody that had Maryland as a loss? So I mean, I don't think he's going to lose his job, but I don't really think he's going to be long for the world out there, though. I mean, it's outside of that one good year with Caleb Williams, it's been a bust.
Yeah, and I have obviously a lot of friends out west because I went to Arizona State, so I'm a kid of the Pac-12. And I remember golfing with some in the spring, and there were a couple of USC alums. And so they were running around, chest was out, oh, we're in the Big Ten, we're this and we're that. And I looked at this guy and I said, you understand that the athlete you're about to go play in the Big Ten is completely different than anything you've ever seen in the Pac-12 aside from Oregon. It's a completely different league. It's a completely different conference. And USC doesn't have the guys to compete with the dudes in the Big Ten. It's brawn, it's physical versus 7-on-7 West Coast. And I cannot believe that realignment can be boiled down to this, Paul, in a nutshell. It was greedy money grabbers. Had USC just stayed the course and waited instead of being so jumpy to get to the Big Ten, they wouldn't be dealing with this. They could have stayed and got the money from the Pac-12. Colorado was on the rise with Coach Prime. Washington was just in the national championship. Oregon, just sit back and wait. And now they put themselves in a position to have to travel to Maryland and have a losing record in the first year in a league, leaving a conference they used to dominate.
Yeah, and this was the year they probably could have done well because they missed 1 or 2 people on that schedule, as you well know. That I thought they got a very favorable Pac-12 schedule, but it's I don't know where you go for Lincoln Riley, and he I'm sure he's talking to his agent this morning saying, is there anywhere else we can go? Because I mean, I think it's pretty evident where this is going to end, and it's going to end at some point with him getting run out of there.
I'll wrap you with this. Maybe it's because you and I pay attention a lot. Deion has not been as vocal the last month. Am I right or wrong about that?
You're right, and I take all the credit for that, Matt. I mean, I was all over him and about win some games, do some. I'm kidding, of course, but this is what should be going on. We should be appreciating and complimenting Deion Sanders for what he does on the field, not for the show. And that's what irritated a lot of people. He was getting credit. We were being asked ridiculous questions, but I give him major credit for dealing with injuries, the Travis Hunter situation. His 2 sons both have been banged up, and really go out and convincingly win games. That's hard to do. Um, this is a bowl team now. I mean, I'm sure some of our friends up and down the hall where you live and work will have them in the playoffs tomorrow morning. They're not they're probably not going to be in the playoffs, but they have a very narrow path to at least take a swing.
Yeah, and look, they're in contention of the Big 12. I mean,
Yeah.
they're 3-1 in the league. They're, BYU, Iowa State are undefeated in the league at 4-0, 4-0. So they're right in the mix with that. Lastly, I lied. Like Saban called you out this week. Everything good? I mean, you guys good there?
Yeah, that's what we do. And Nick Saban acts like since 2017, I said his program, was out of the playoffs every year, and he was never going to win another national championship. It turned out that he really just won one national championship since 2017. I'm not taking anything away from him, but that's the business we're all in. I thought it was funny. I mean, Sarkisian joined in later on, but that's okay. At least they know my name.
Paul, the most popular kid in school, always has been. Paul Finebaum, we appreciate you as always. Week 8 left us thinking who, what now. There could be a new guard in charge of college football after what we saw on Saturday. For Paul Finebaum and Matt Barrie, thank you for watching the Matt Barrie Show, presented by Allstate here on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel.